Thank you for joining Beyond the Workbench, a podcast where Odin and Michael Magnus discuss life, business, and how to help entrepreneurs grow and innovate.
We're going to continue our series of interviews and talks. Magnus and I talk all the time, but we love to have other makers on. This set of makers I actually is really interested in talking to because there's a lot of similarities between myself, my wife, and my business and what you all are doing. And by you all, I mean Garrett and Amanda from Grit Mercantile down in, I believe, Round Rock, Texas. Is that correct? I don't want to say Austin. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
For starters, tell us a little bit about your business and what you guys do and how you got started.
So that would probably start with me. About 5 years ago, I had one of those nice designer wallets, right? And I had it for 2 or 3 years. And after 2 or 3 years, it was falling apart. And I was buying one every 2 or 3 years. And I was like, you know what? I'm getting older. I deserve a nice real leather wallet. So I reached out to 3 makers, and 2 of them responded. One of them didn't. The first one that responded said, appreciate the ask, but I'm super busy. We're not taking any customers right now. I totally get it. The next one who responded said the exact same thing. He said, but go out, watch some of my videos and make your own. You can do it. So I was like, okay, cool. So I took his advice. I went and watched his videos along with the other makers that didn't respond and did respond. And I started seeing what I could do. So I made a couple of wallets. And the fourth one I made, I sent pictures back to Parker Litchfield, formerly of Stock and Barrel. And I said, what do you think? And he said, 100% honest, it looks like you've been doing this for 2 or 3 years. He said, your stitching is great. He goes, everything is even. Your lines are straight. He goes, this is a great looking wallet. He goes, keep it up. So that turned into making a few more wallets and kind of designing a few more things. And then when Amanda came in the picture, at the time, our dining room was a craft room. We've never used it as a dining room. It's pointless to have it as that. And I walked in and I was like, I got to ask, I need 12 square feet, just 12. A bench in the corner on the wall. I just need 12 square feet. I was doing a lot of woodwork and stuff out in the garage. I was absent all the time, not inside the house. It was hot. It's Texas. My garage is not air conditioned. My third car is not air conditioned. So I wanted to find something I could do and work with my hands inside. And that would be a good way to do it. That way we could all be together. So that bench turned into literally what you see behind Amanda. That is the bench and that is the wall. And then when I started coming in and she started seeing what I was doing, then that she got involved and that just kind of changed things.
What year was that when you started? Like when you first said, hey, I'm going to start making things?
Right around January 2000.
2000. Wow. That is so as someone who has, a similar brand and there's a lot of things going on. Again, I'm very excited about talking to you because there are so many similarities and
yeah.
Maybe you all have found the solution for some of the challenges I've run into over the years, and you please share them with me as we go through this. That's 5 years. That's really incredible speed you've put this through, and you've grown a brand. And even I was browsing your website earlier, and I realized it seems like you guys have already matured through some of the phases of opening a business that many others, including myself, it takes much longer to get through them. Like your product line is very clean, your website is clean, it's very. I can look at your website and I know what you make, right? It seems like a very novel thing, but you've already done all that. How are you able to speed through that growth, that startup phase so quickly?
So I will speak to that, and thank you for that. That means a lot because we very much admire your work as well. And I think, there's a beautiful similarity, and I feel like love of a classic design that we both have. So as far as one of the keys for Garrett and me is that this is not the first business we've had together. And I haven't shared that a whole lot, but a little bit every once in a while. When our daughter was a toddler, we had an embroidery business and we learned a lot of things through that. I have the art background. I have the marketing background. Content. I used to be a literary publicist and book publisher. So I kind of come from that world. And so when we had our embroidery business, one of the things that I did, I actually hand drew and created these characters because it was kind of geared towards a baby market and these different animals. And Garrett's always been so good at mechanical stuff. So in some of those ways we figured out, okay, these are our strengths. This is where we're going. But then over time, we started butting heads. And also the market, we realized it was pretty saturated. We were going through Etsy at the time, and there were just so many embroidery businesses that they would just, like, so many people that would either do it overseas or would do it for nothing. And we were trying to grow a business. And so that wasn't working for us. And kind of this vision that we had in mind, it just wasn't. We started a website, I think it was like through BigCommerce.
Mm-hmm. That also.
Yeah. But I want to say it wasn't that long after getting into doing the website, we were like, this is just, it's not working. We tried other avenues. And then Garrett and I, we started butting heads as far as like, I feel like we learned that, okay, we got to not start wishing that the other was like us, but through that experience, embrace what each other has that are different about each other. We're similar in a lot of ways aesthetically, which is great, especially with this business. We have very similar ideas as far as design, and yet our personalities are very different, and our strengths and our weaknesses are very opposite from each other. So through that whole embroidery business, and then we've had a couple other little things. One of them I'm going to shoot over to Garrett to tell y'all about, because he mentioned the woodwork, but I think that there was something much cooler that he was doing with the woodwork. And then I was kind of like helping on the backside of that. So yeah, it's through those other experiences that set us up to ramp up faster with this one.
When you said you guys started butting heads, again, another area where it makes me giggle and kind of chuckle a little bit, because husband and wife teams, I think every time we talk to husband and wife team, or I've talked to one, I'm noticing no matter what the business is, there's always this acknowledgement of, hey, it's tough. There's some challenges there to be that close to someone and having to, wanting to, not like having to, work with them. And so one more area in which I'm sure we can have some similarities and we can talk through. Magnus, it looks like you have a question there.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do admire that as well. And we've had a number of conversations, even with Dave, talking about his wife's involvement in the business a couple episodes back. And, I want to represent the other type of people that I talked to my wife the other day, and we were discussing, just some always percolating over business ideas and whatnot. And I was like, is there anything you would want to get involved in? And she's like, no. and
I respect that.
She meant it genuinely and lovingly. We met because we worked together, and she's like, we work much better as a couple than we do as coworkers. Let me know how I can support you by driving the kids to karate, by doing any of these things. But our marriage is stronger not being in a business together. So although I do acknowledge and admire people who can do that, I also, for any listeners who they're not in that situation, I want to offer that other perspective that it's certainly not for everybody.
No, it's not for the weak of heart. I can tell you that. In my opinion,
no, it's not.
So Amanda mentioned there was this other interesting business. So she's got us intrigued, got us on a hook a little bit. What is this other interesting business she's referencing?
So I wanted to get into woodworking because I did woodworking when I was younger. So if you rewind back to when I was just graduated high school, I got into car audio. And I worked at a shop for 5 years, the last 2 years on and off, and we did a lot of high-end stuff. We may have a Honda Accord that rolled in one day, and the next day I'm working on a Viper for Julio Franco or Pudge Rodriguez. So we had a lot of high-end stuff. Well, a lot of that has to do with fabrication. You're building panels, you're building boxes, you're doing electrical work, you're taking apart cars, you're putting things back together. I've always had to do something like that. So I thought, well, how could I blend both of those together and do that? So I thought, well, a friend of mine had a suggestion. He's like, hey, he goes, why don't you build me a Bluetooth speaker box that looks like a classic guitar amp? I was like, that's pretty cool. Let me think about it. So I thought about it and started looking up how to build speakers and things like that. And it turned into, I started building Bluetooth speaker boxes that look like classic guitar amps using, Fender Tweed, using the same, leather handles, the corners, switches, all sorts of stuff. And it turned out pretty cool. I built a lot of really cool boxes, sold quite a few of them on Etsy. But I think the key takeaway for me there was I ran into a perfectionism that was really tough. Everything had to be absolutely perfect. And my dad set me down one day and he's like, look, he says, your 100% or your 80% is everybody else's perceived 120 of you. So you need to back off a little bit, and you need to kind of let some of that perfection go. And that was kind of a light bulb, and it switched. I still remained a perfectionist. I just figured out how to do it in a productive manner. So if I was building a box and I was covering it with Tolex, I would do it the same way every single time. If I was building a wiring harness, I knew that I had to service that box in the future. I wanted to make it as easy as possible for me. So I started designing things around as make it efficient as possible, but in doing that, it makes it super easy to make it repeatable. So that really, really, really helped. So fast forward to when you're making a leather tote bag, right? Every time that we design something, I'm looking at it thinking, okay, I'm going to have to do this over and over again. Can it be done? Can it be done efficiently? Can I sell it for a price that I can do it efficiently? And can I make it look the same every single time? Can I keep the same aesthetic?
People can't see. I know we're in this audio. People can't see me like shaking my head so
Yeah.
big. I'm like, exactly. It's such a big difference between designing something, making something one time.
Yep.
You're designing and making something that we intend to make it hundreds or thousands of times after that. There's a huge difference there, and you have to consider that. And again, you're only 5 years in. It's like you said, that's breakneck speed going through that learning curve. So I think the rest of us are behind. You guys are setting the pace at this point. So it's really cool.
I want it to be muscle memory.
Yeah.
Every time I fold a rolled edge, I want it to feel the same that it did every single time.
Yeah.
And if I can get it muscle memory, then we're good.
I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the interview and discussion we had with Dave Munson, but he mentioned some things about, templatizing some of our brand decisions and about rolled edges and stitching. And that's like the next level.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. That's what I want to do. And I see you shaking your head. That's probably also for you all, if you haven't done it already, where some of those design decisions have already been made because it is ingrained into our brand package.
Yep.
And I absolutely love that. I love that the process around it. And it seems like you all also, were kindred spirits in that respect. So very cool stuff.
Yeah, we learned early on, so Garrett shared about how, he was starting off doing the leather work. So I used to call myself a multi-crafter, did a lot of art growing up, a lot of crafting and creating all kinds of different things. And so I'm happiest when I'm creating, whether it is building something or music. And I feel like they're the same thing. I actually, which we can get into a little bit of this, but Garrett and I met when I was in college and I was studying music. And that's an interesting story in it. But being somebody who loves to create, it was really hard for me to stand back and see him doing this amazing thing and working with leather, which I've always loved since as a little girl. Showing horses, one of my favorite chores was cleaning and conditioning the saddles and the bridles and everything. So yeah, I was like, okay, but I'm going to let him have this, because I was still at that point thinking back to, okay, we've done this before. And what Michael shared about recognizing, okay, maybe this having a business together thing, working together thing is not really what works for us. That's kind of how we left that embroidery business with that mindset. And then I was supporting Garrett when he was doing the speaker boxes and things on the back end, watching him with this. And I knew it was such a huge thing in my wheelhouse. And I'm like, I also have kind of a fashion background. So it's like, oh, I really have a lot of ideas here that I wanted to, I let him have it for a little bit. And then I kind of can I play? Can I please come over and play? And so he was gracious enough to let me join him in that. And it's really cool because he is really good at, he's great. You're great, babe. But he's really good at certain types of leather craft, and I'm better at other types of leather craft. So it's when we recognize again that, oh, your strengths are here, my strengths are here. So for example, he's really, really good with tools, and he's had a lot more experience with more. I've worked with a lot of tools over the years, but not the same way he has. So we incorporate a lot of woodworking tools in our leathercraft. And we have this one rotary blade and Olfa knife that I've shown it before on our lives, that it has handwritten, he's smiling. It has handwritten by Garrett, "Do not touch." And it doesn't mean that Amanda can't touch it and put it away. It means Amanda cannot use that knife to try to cut anything. Because I'm built differently and I don't have the same experience. And I tend to wobble with the rotary blade, and I wobble into the metal ruler, and then the blade is done. So yeah, there are certain areas that's like, okay, that's Garrett's, like, let that be his. And yeah, he's especially good at like those smaller leather goods, although he'll say that he hates to hand saddle stitch, but seeing him do it, it's pretty great. And then there's certain like wallets that I'm like, you really should make some of these again. And he's like, I don't want to hand saddle stitch. And I'm like, I'll stitch it.
I don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
But I am like more like the bag design and all of that. That's when I was like, I really want to make bags.
So one of you seems like you're far more technical. Like, Garrett, you and I are probably more like I'm the 45-degree, 90-degree angle guy. I like everything very tight and understood. And there has to be a process for everything. Yeah. And then, but where I struggle personally is in the more abstract stuff, right? We just before joining this call, I was talking to my wife about one of the bags I designed recently, and I was going through getting her feedback, and I'm trying to put a formula together. Like, hey, the ratio of the height width depth ratio is off for me. Yeah. She's like, what the heck are you talking about, dude? It's like, it just doesn't work. And she's like, and I couldn't explain. I was like, I need to know the formula because I need a perfect all this stuff.
Yes.
And she's like,
give me the math, I'll do the math.
Exactly. I need what's the formula for, right? And she is like more of a feeling type of a person. Yeah. Now, where we're different as couples is probably going to be like, she is definitely more of a diva bedazzler, She doesn't do that, but just to be, she likes the bling. She likes the lots of details. And I'm like, I absolutely don't. I want classic look and feel. And so that's where we've struggled aesthetically, but we're far in a better place now. I mean, she understands, she's a marketing person. So we put it in the context of what's the brand, not about what she personally likes or doesn't like. It's about what the Odin and Other Goods brand is. And that's how we filter our decisions through the brand piece, not so much about our personal preferences on those things. So it's been an evolution. I mean, we've been at it now for 12 years. And every year as we get a little better, and we lose some ground here and there along the way, but we make it up other places.
That's one of the things that I love about business. I was talking about this earlier today, that I love that it's organic in the way that it just becomes its own thing, and it can grow into areas that you never would have thought that it was going to grow into before.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about that rotary cutter, as trivial as that may, some of the audience might think that's kind of a trivial thing. When I used to work on cars, I worked around other guys that worked on cars, been doing it for a lot longer than I had, and we were in a very close shop. So you're talking, 4 or 5 guys, and we're talking 4 or 5 toolboxes. All those toolboxes say Snap-on, and those are very expensive tools. I still have some of those tools to this day, 30-year-old screwdrivers, right? But if you had to use a tool of somebody else's and you had to go borrow that tool, that was a big deal. And if your tool was on the bench, or their tools on the bench, you didn't pick it up and use it. It was kind of very territorial, because that wrench you were using was probably about $50 or $60 back in the day, more now. And that was something that you just didn't mess with. So we both have our own maul. I have my own maul. She has hers, and our own rotary cutters. We share kind of everything else. But that's kind of where it came from, because you get the feel of it. You know it's yours. You know how it handles. You know how it works. You know how it's going to function every single time. And that it makes a big difference, an absolute big difference. And it makes a great story, absolute great story.
We have a similar type of thing here. For me, the growth was one, like getting her involved in the workshop, what she is willing to touch, what she's not willing to touch. But then I have the other layer, which is I have employees and I have people that help me in workshop as well. And I've gone through this process of, okay, these are my tools. They're set up the way I want. Now it's an open workshop where they're all my tools, right? And they're all using them at the same time. And so we've had to develop this system of, when Odin comes up in the workshop later tonight, where is everything? Yeah. And we agree that they should be in this vicinity at least, right? But I've had to really relinquish a lot of control over things to grow. Yeah. And that was really tough for me, is like, how do I maintain the workshop, in this case, the way I want, but also give room for these guys who are very proficient, they're able to work and they're able to do great things, and give them room to do it their way, which is what's needed for them to be successful. it's been, and now I'm at a point in the evolution where I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to go back to having my own personal workshop with my own personal tools.
Yep.
Right. Where I don't have to go through that every time I go out in the workshop. It's like you go through this roller coaster of cycles and growth and when things are acceptable, not acceptable. And I mean, it's been interesting. A year or two ago, I don't think I wanted my personal workshop. Now I can't wait to get my own personal workshop again. That's not here.
Sure.
Surprisingly, I need to be great. You're talking about being home earlier. I want to be closer to home now because I spend so much time in the workshop. And so that's important to me, but it's been a growth process for sure.
And I think with that too, it's not even just if you have a shop. We've started to try to establish something at our house where when the kids use my tools, because we have a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they are not going to put them back where I would like to put them back, particularly stamping tools. And so what we've kind of started to establish at home is kind of like how you have at the bank the used pen cup. Well, we kind of have a little tray of whatever tools you use. Don't worry about putting them back. Just worry about putting them up.
Yeah.
They need to, you do need to tidy. And that's been, we're still trying that out. I'll report back on how that's gone, but that is something that we've been at least attempting to find that happy middle ground of that camouflage tool is 2 spots to the left. Why is it like that? And them just abandoning everything because they don't want to be wrong. So
I like the way you position that system. My wife tells me I position more like an ADHD thing where I just throw everything in one box and I worry about it later. So your way of describing this is far better than mine.
Yes. A tray or a box, it's kind of similar.
Exactly.
Every tool has its place.
It just happens to be this tray that's all piled up in the same tray until next week when I can't handle it anymore. So
yes.
Well, I think some of that scale too. My kids making a quick project in the garage is a little bit different than having 3 employees.
Maybe so.
Building full production. So,
but I'm probably the biggest offender in the shop with that kind of stuff because I'm like I don't have time to go bring this thing all the way back across shop and put it back where I'm just going to put it in this bucket and then the bucket just starts overflowing one day. And actually, we have a young lady here. Her name's Riley. She has taken upon herself to go clear out my buckets from around the workshop every so often because she can't handle them when she walks by because she's a little OCD. So her OCD and my ADHD and spragness kind of match up and it turns into a good system. But she just walks behind me and cleans up behind me at times. So Amanda, what do you think?
Yes. So what you're talking about, Odin, made me think about for us in our studio, one of the best things that has helped us to grow is literally we have just a defined space. Now I have to admit it's a home studio and we have expanded beyond the studio into the house, other parts of the house. But we have pretty much all of our storage can be modified and moved around. Like I just went through the board behind me and the pegboard and just changed all of that. We'd had it for years and I was like, I'm pulling all of these tools down that I know we don't reach for anymore because we're not just doing wallets all the time. And we're not doing, we're using these other ones, these ones that if we had a bucket, usually it is a box or a tray or something, and I end up like on our main work table, gathering up our tools and then putting them over here to put away. I'm like, okay, these are the ones that we use. It's always a good clue to me that, okay, it has a home, but the fact that I keep on having to walk across the room to go put it up means probably that home is not in the right place anymore.
I think when you're talking about growth earlier, I think you hit on something that really drives home for me. When I think about where we started and where we are today and where we're going to be whenever, I mean, tools, when we're talking about tools, and some tools change, right? Like I don't use a chisel much anymore. I don't use stitching chisels anymore. I use a laser to cut my holes because it's more efficient. It's quicker. It has its downsides. But I think it all goes to growth and production because at the end of the day, if we have to produce a certain number of things, we're 2 people. I have a day job, right? There's only so much that I can do during the day. There's only so much Amanda can do during the day. So that's one thing that we constantly have to talk about and have to think about is like, okay, do we have any room for any new tools? The answer is no. I know you have a healthy struggle with that as well, which I absolutely love. we're going to purchase a new tool on Friday, and we're going to make room for it because we really that's going to shave minutes off some of the stuff that we do. So from a growth aspect and what we do, I think it's changed a lot. And now that I look back on it, and you mentioned it, maybe it has changed pretty fast, and maybe I just haven't even noticed it.
When I first came on the scene, I know a lot of the older makers, they were like, where did this guy come from? And they'd pull me aside in corners here and there, and they'd have these quiet conversations with me because I don't know, maybe they didn't ever know they were talking to me, but they wanted to know, how did you go through this? And and so I talked to them. And the one area I think it sounds like we actually will also be aligned on is now people know I have all these tools here. I've got a workshop full of stuff, which is great. But the first few years, it was all about doing the most I could with the least amount possible.
Yep.
Right. Like what I try my best to do is never fall into the trap of, well, I would do better if I had this additional tool. My approach was, no, I just need to be more efficient.
Yeah.
Right. And so how do I get more product done every night or every week? Just be better. Right. And how do I be better? Well, everything from taking the chairs out of the workshop, because if I have a chair, I'm going to sit down in the chair and I'm already tired, so that doesn't work. Or, I just need to lay to my workout differently. I need to batch my things together. Tuesdays are for this thing and Wednesdays are for this, all those type of things, just efficiencies. That's what we went through before we started buying tools, right?
Yeah.
The tools were after we exhausted everything else, possible. Yeah. And so that's how we grow, and that's how we grew without taking on a bunch of debt, as well. That was really important for us in early years.
Well, and I think an important part of that story that's missing as well is that background in marketing, that fundamental understanding of how to tell a good story, how to package something in an interesting way. And I think that is something that all of us at our businesses have in common. We've talked a little bit about Garrett's professional background, but I first met Amanda when she took one of my classes in Waco at the Heart of Texas Leather Show. And she had such great contributions to the class that I had her virtually join into one of the classes I taught in Sheridan to share about publicity and publishing books and things like that, because that's her background. So I do want to kind of kick it over to you, Amanda, and share a little bit about how you think that professional background has contributed to that growth, and maybe share some of the biggest wins that you guys have had from a marketing publicity perspective.
That's a really good question. Thank you. And yes, I absolutely loved his class. That was the first year that we went to one of the leather trade shows, Heart of Texas Leather Show. It's always the first week in August in Waco, Texas. And so I learned from my great grandmother, who still at 100 was learning every day to always grow and always learn. And that's what I'm just a huge proponent of. Anytime that we can grow and learn, and I'm just a curious person.
You take our class every time we offer it in Waco on the marketing class. And it's funny to me because every time I see your name, I'm like, Amanda could be teaching this class. But it's great to see your name in there. And I really appreciate that somebody who has an expertise in marketing, who is likely going to hear similar versions of what she's heard before, is still willing to jump in and take those classes again, because there's going to be something else that resonates this time that maybe didn't before. And so I always get excited and a little intimidated to see your name on the list, because I want to make sure that we're providing value for you when you take it. But you always have great contributions. You always have great questions. And, after the fact, I always think I'm glad you came back.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And I love taking it. Yeah, absolutely. Of course. But as far as how publicity and, book design and book publishing has helped us grow in our business, I very strongly feel like, coming from that perspective, I have an idea in my mind of more of a holistic view, an end game picture per se of, okay, this is how I want this all to be. And it needs all of these components to come together cohesively, whether it's how we design a new item or how we talk about the items, how we take the photos are, so it is Garrett and me, but there's another huge person in our business, and that's our daughter. She's our teenage daughter, and she's amazing. And she has discovered a love of photography, and she's really great at it. And it started more with nature photography, and now I'm molding her a little bit into, okay, here's how you take fashion photography. And so she's actually our photographer now. We're up in Fort Worth last week, and we're able to do some photo shoots with that. But even in those photo shoots, we have that communication of, is it all speaking this story together? So yeah, I would say, I guess if I had to wrap it up in one word, it was the story. And I feel like just the way that Garrett and I are, we're very genuine people, and we love to just relate to others. And we have a story to tell. We embrace that others do as well. Anything that we make, we want that to become part of somebody else's story.
Yeah, I think one of the things that can be difficult is promoting yourself. I think we're all kind of very self-conscious about that it feels vain to do our own PR. And I do think that that's one of the areas that we can really all help each other. Over the years, that's something that I've been very intentional about. I don't know if you guys know Annie Libertini, but she made the masks for Encanto Live at the Hollywood Bowl that was on Disney Plus. And that was incredible. And so I contacted Disney fan sites and Spokane, the local news and art communities in her state. And I was like, did you know this person's doing this cool thing? And I think she ended up getting 2 or 3 interviews out of it. And it took me 30 minutes because it was a legitimate news tip, right? It was just me sharing something neat that somebody else was doing. Now, I wouldn't do that for myself. And even if I did, that would probably come across as an advertisement. So they would just send me to go talk to, the sponsorship folks. But I think that's one thing that we can all do that helps the industry is look out for those good stories that people may not be willing to tell themselves. Aaron and Janie Sue, when they were helping during Hurricane Harvey, I called the local news stations. I was like, hey, do you guys know they're doing this? And did it get them any new customers? I don't know, maybe not, but did it raise the profile of leather workers for their entire community? Yeah. And so I think those are little things that we can all do to support each other without necessarily having to self-promote. That is always a little bit of an awkward thing.
The good thing about branding is you don't always know what the story is, but it's cohesive. It feels like it's together, right? And like it doesn't feel like a hodgepodge of things, And so, Instagram, it is very story, driven. As you've continued to grow, right? You obviously understand why story is important, but as you're going to grow, have you run into any struggles with trying to stay true to that story and this need to continue to tell the story on a regular basis as you balance that off with all the other tasks that are required of you day to day?
Yes, I can definitely speak to that. So one of the things that has been surprising to me, given my background, is when I had envisioned, and Garrett and I talked through, like, what does this business look like? What does it need to grow? And I mentioned earlier about, how business can just take on a life of its own sometimes. And sometimes it needs to be reined in. And it's like, oh, we went a little too far off that way. We need to come back and see what's working for us and what people really want and responding to. Or maybe it's that, like we've discovered in the last year and a half, that we've been started doing in-person markets. Well, we had honestly started to wonder, like, we love making bags and these things, but they're not selling. Do we need to not do that anymore? But it wasn't that. It was, we just needed to bring it to a different audience. So as far as my biggest surprise has been, I have really not spent a whole lot of time yet on reaching out to the media. And it's like, I know I have these skills. I know how to do all these things. I need to write. I need to do all of this. But it's like with balancing all of the day-to-day, literally earlier today, going through QuickBooks, doing all those, making sure everything's input exactly correctly, sending, there's the other business side that is creative, but you can still make it fun. That it's like, that has more importance and more weight right now. I do still need to do this other stuff. But in the meantime, what I've decided to do, and I see Garrett wants to add something, but get a little bit over some of that perfectionist of this is the picture that I have and this is how it needs to be, and just like embrace where I'm in the moment. And that's why I started about 6 weeks ago doing a weekly live. I hope one day maybe Mr. Willis will join in. He's in the background a little bit. Our daughter is fully joined in. She was like running it today. Yeah, so this is a segue to get, when Michael reached out, I was like, yes, and I want Garrett on it.
I think the biggest surprise to me was who our customer was. I think you always go into it and you walk into it and go, these are the people that I want to sell to. And since we started doing markets in the last year and a quarter, year and a half, who our customer is, we kind of figured out up front who they were. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is a friend of mine the other day, and I was like, when we did this market, we went out there and we had all these people that were asking us about what we did and why. They were just as enthralled and they were just as motivated to know what our story was. And the feeling that somebody wants to know that and they care enough about that and what you're doing, I mean, that means the absolute world. That automatically makes us go, what makes you like that? What makes you like leather? What do you like about this? Then you get to hear their story. And when you hear their story and you tell your story, you've made that connection, you made that bond. And there was a lady that came up to us at the Kalahari market that we did, and she knew what Horween leather was, and she had these boots that she had for like 15 years, and she wanted a little zipper pouch that would last forever because it was made out of leather and she knew what it was. So having those stories together and getting to know customers like that means an absolute ton right there.
I often tell makers that I think markets it's tough. It's a lot of work, and also if you're introvert, like I'm typically an introvert, it's actually a really big spend of energy for me.
Yes.
But I don't know if I found, especially when I was, when the company was smaller, I don't know if I found a better way to really get a feeling for what other people think.
Yep.
Which is also very scary, right? To put yourself out there, and they can look at you and tell you firsthand. You can see people's face, and they like it, they don't like it. That's a tough thing to deal with at times. But it was probably when I first started doing markets, that was probably the biggest step forward that I made at one time in growing the business. When I say, okay, now I've got to put it out there. You can't grow a business on family and friends. You've got to be exposed and try to find people you don't know. There's no obligation for them to be nice to you, right? For any reason, they will be honest. They like it, they don't like it, right? And so I encourage a lot of people to do that. And a lot of markets are very cheap. You can do farmers markets, like $25 a week, something like that. But that's a really big step forward. But you guys have success before that. So just like you actually added that in a little later, it seems, right? So what in the first few markets that you've done over the last year and a half or so, what's the biggest lessons that have come out of it for you? Besides so you already mentioned customers and knowing the customers, but what else has come out of it?
Huge for us is the back end side of organization. And I have to be honest here and open, transparent, that Odin, you are one of the people that I have looked to learn merchandising.
Oh, wow.
And I have we've literally been to your stores and I'm like, okay, artistically, what are the shapes that we're building and we're doing at different heights? And why does this work so well together until that's cohesive stories?
I feel like I need to bring my wife on now.
Yeah.
To be honest, these days, that is, I would say it originally was me, but my wife has taken she's taken it by the reins. It is all her now.
Well, good, Rochelle.
She does a fantastic job. I have to give her kudos on that. And, you're learning, obviously, it's an art and a science to merchandising.
Yeah.
I never worked retail as a young person or anything, so I was very new to it, but we continuously learn. It's an art and a science, and we just spent earlier today shifting around one of the stores here to try some new things. So that again, but I'm going to give you your kudos on this as well for that. The fact that you picked up on that now, you probably can go to markets. I do it all the time, and I see other vendors who have been doing it for 10, 15 years. I've been doing these markets, and they have not picked up on the concept of a brand, a story, product consistency, and merchandising at all.
Yeah.
And they almost they refuse to even go that direction. Right. And you haven't. You've already jumped in on that.
I feel like that's actually one of the huge needs that I see specifically in Leathercraft is a lot of it's just some feedback and some mentoring along the because I feel like as much as we have learned, we can help others and our whole industry will do better because of that. It can be such a small shift. It could be something you just put these together and that works better than having, like you said, I've seen so many booths where, and they're a different type of leather crafter than we are, where maybe they're typically more of like completely custom. We're not, we do some custom work. We just sent something off the other day. But a lot of times we don't bring on that custom work unless we see either we were already thinking about doing something similar or it's not going to be a huge shift for us and it could be a possible new avenue for us.
Same here,
which was the case with this. And it's going to be a surprise, so I'm not going to tell what it is yet, but I'm excited.
That takes us full circle to the beginning, right? When I asked 3 leather workers, right, would you make this custom wallet for me? And, 2 responded, and 1 didn't. And that's custom work is like Amanda said, it's really cool when you do it. And if it's something you really, really want to do, when you're operating a production shop or a semi-production shop, that becomes an impediment to that production at some point, unless you're really passionate and have drive behind it. I hate to tell, we had several people at the last market, hey, could you do this? Could you do that? I can do that all day long. It's not going to be what you're going to want to pay for it, number one. And number two, it's going to take a lot to do that on our end, to do that. We don't have the time to do that. I hate to tell people no, because I would really like to make them cool stuff.
Do you struggle saying no to some of those cooler projects at times?
Yeah. Well, yes, at my day job, I'm known for being able to say no really well. And I do say no most of the time really well. But you've got somebody that comes to you that's just as passionate as you are about something, and you've already made that connection, and that's hard.
Yep.
And I don't like to tell people no, and I can't tell them the full reason why I'm telling them no. I don't want to tell them that. It's tough to do.
So I want to add with that. So back when I was in book publishing, most of the projects that we had were author funded. So that being said, that meant one of the important things about that, of course, is the author is funding it, but they are also keeping all of the rights to it. So that means that as a publishing company, we didn't have technically, we had to work more with the authors on all aspects of creating this book from a manuscript. And sometimes, yes, they were handwritten manuscripts. And sometimes there was one I remember was like a combination of a handwritten manuscript and actual real, photographs that they sent in to us, and we're like, oh, we don't want to lose this. That I remember specifically that author, she had a very, very strong, compelling story to tell, and it was an important story to tell. But she had a very, very strong, vision of what she thought that this book needed to be like, even to the point of how it was bound. But as a publisher, I knew that's the wrong size for this genre. That's the wrong kind of binding. Therefore, even before you get out of the gate, you're making decisions that mean that bookstores were never going to carry this book. So it's always bringing it finally into the market.
Those are hard messages. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I find that I have to do, and I've been more aware of this probably more recently in the last year or so, is making sure I'm checking myself to say, okay, am I thinking as a hobbyist and a passionate leatherworker who really enjoys this and likes doing cool stuff? Or am I thinking as a business owner?
Yeah.
Yep.
Those two things are at times, more often than not, they're at conflict with each other, right? I mean, even when I'm thinking about buying a new machine, am I buying it because Odin, I really want that cool machine because I've dreamed about it? But then does it really have a place in the business? So constantly back and forth. But by being able to self-identify where I'm standing at any time, that's helped me through this process. So even when someone comes in, they say they want a custom. Anytime someone comes in the shop, they ask about custom. If I'm standing up front, if I'm not standing up front, the girls just say no, and it's done, right? If I'm there, they kind of glance at me, and I'll say, well, no, and then I usually follow up with, but what'd you have in mind, right? And that what you have in mind question gives me a little space to say, I'll filter, is it something that I wanted to learn how to do anyway?
Yep.
Right. And now the customer essentially is going to be, as Jimmy DeRista would say, they're paying for me to go to school on this thing. Okay. because I can use that skill, or I can use that thing as a design or a prototype, whatever later, or is there some kind of marketing value to it? That's often important for me because it gives me a chance to tell a story about something that,
Yep.
I mean, a lot of things you see on my lives and Instagram stories, I'll never make again. It's just marketing. It's just a way for me to engage folks. And I enjoy it also. But the question is why? What's the value? But it has to have a value to the business. And if it doesn't have value to the business, then I typically do have to pass on it. And the other lesson for me is I've got to pass on it faster, not slower. Say no as fast as possible. If you're going to say no, just get it out of the way and move on. Right.
So I agree with you, but a caveat of from book publishing, I've learned sometimes somebody has something in mind. They're not a leather worker. They don't know how leather works and how to make something from a 2D image to a 3D physical
Absolutely.
item. That I have that ability, and I feel like the publishing really helped of that back and forth of, okay, this is what I see you're wanting. That's not going to work this way, but I think we can make it work another way.
Yeah.
And maybe that's some of that marketing perspective as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Michael.
I do want to ask kind of last question, something we always ask our guests. I say always, you guys are our second guests, but what is something that you have read or seen or heard that has inspired you or kind of retooled the way you thought about something in the last few weeks?
I can't say few weeks, but I can say probably maybe year. We were visiting our favorite leather vendor in Elmont, and we were having an issue because we sell digital patterns as well as leather goods, right? And we had one of our digital patterns that was being knocked off quite a bit. And we were trying to shut people down doing that. And I looked at Aaron and I was like, hey, what do we do? And he said, I'm going to be really honest with you, and you're probably not going to like what I'm about to say. Are you a leather goods business? Or are you a template business? I said, we're a leather goods business. He goes, you got your answer. And that was it. And that was really kind of an eye-opening business driving decision that allowed us to take the reins off that stuff, not worry about that stuff anymore, and drive more towards the leather goods piece of it. And in turn share and not be afraid to share that design and what it was. Because there are other people that are going to make it hopefully better. And frankly, we can get the goodness off of it when they do. Because they're going to make it, they're going to show people, and hopefully they're going to say where it came from.
I sympathize with you on that. Obviously, that's something I've gone through as well. And I absolutely, Aaron's leading out on these things. I mean, obviously he's put a lot of thought into this, and he's a great person to follow and take advice from. I certainly do when I have the pleasure to talk to him. But I'll say it a different way, which is sharing freely is going to allow us to stay in front. You can take freely and we'll be behind everyone, or we can share freely and be in front of everyone. So we lead the way, we put it out there, the world and the community will use it, and we give it away because it's not ours in the first place, right? Give it out to everyone. And then that's how we are going to maintain a position, not just within the community, but more importantly, maintain a position with our customers, which really what matters to us most, right? Is our customers buying the products. And by being the people that give away templates and give away advice and teach other people how to make the same things we're making, it tells our customers that we're leading. And I think that's more important than holding on to one template or one pattern or something like that, or worrying about, well, I was doing this last year, I was on the guy, now there's 20 people doing it. Well, it's always going to be the case. It's just not worth it.
We're not a saddle shop 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would say for me, and some of it, it's funny, Garrett, that you talked about Maker's Leather Supply, because Aaron's been a great, in the whole group, that especially Aaron's been a great mentor to us. And one of the best things that he has taught me, and it ties in, Michael, with your question about something read or saw, is that he has a very different approach than Garrett and I have. Garrett and I are both, willing to stay. Can definitely lean towards perfectionism, and we can let that perfectionism keep us from trying something new, or more importantly, not so much trying something new, but I would say putting something out there that's probably, compared to other things, way better than something else out there. But it's but it's not perfect, or Dave Munson's book has gone along those lines of something I've read recently, is another great example to me of just try, just do it, just step into it. And it doesn't have to be perfect before you start.
Yeah. I think that kind of brings us full circle in the conversation. We started off with, Garrett talking about perfectionism, things like that. But I remember with what you just said, Amanda, and what you said at the beginning of the conversation, Garrett, I think we're still looking for perfectionism, but we're looking for perfectionism in the sense of efficiencies, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's not so much, hey, is that edge the perfect edge?
Right.
Are we delivering the right edge for our business and for our customer's sake and the value that we're trying to deliver to the customer, right? That's I think that's where we're finding perfection as business owners and small business owners of that. It's not about the one thing. It's about the bigger picture. And you folks certainly seem like you have a grasp on what the bigger picture is and what you're pushing for and why. So it's very impressive.
We hope so.
Very impressive.
Well, tell the listeners, tell them how they can find you guys, how they can learn more about your business.
One of the best ways that you can find us is through our website. It's gritmercantile.com. And yes, we have that funny word as a second word to our business name that Garrett and I often have talked about. Okay, you pronounce it mercantile. We don't care. Just go there. It doesn't matter to us. But that's our website. But Instagram, we're on there quite often. I've been doing more lives, a weekly live on Wednesday afternoons. And so that's a lot of fun and we can interact. But we would love to be in contact, and any questions, we're happy to help.
So you can reach us at Beyond the Workbench on Instagram, Beyond the Workbench on Facebook, and beyondtheworkbench.com online.
Post-production by Instrumental Media.